So basically, while making Days of Future Past, Fox was already planning on what to make next for the X-Men franchise. Being that Marvel was already trying to plan out their movies ahead of time before they ever made them, Fox was deciding, let's just do that but with X-Men. So of course, the idea was to try and plan ahead the sequels and to try and make sure they can do what they can and make sure they know what they're doing. The unfortunate part is they really didn't. They really didn't have a plan besides that there was going to be a follow-up with Apocalypse after Days of Future Past. Thus we have X-Men Apocalypse. Being Bryan Singer again directing, you might think, well, this had to be a fucking slam dinger. Especially because it's the guys who helped him write X2. That's great. But it's also the guy that helped to write X3, and, you know, that was a bit of a problem. So ultimately you have two just not very matching ideas, and ultimately Bryan Singer, now a producer, has a very different idea in terms of what he wants the story to be. Instead of being a cool movie, it's going to be more something that's going to be better for the X-Men franchise. So that's the idea that he's going with. The idea is to make this the most plain thing possible so it can be more Marvel-like, more sellable, more marketable to everyone so that it can be a more successful film to help the overall X-Men franchise. And that's the idea that ultimately X-Men went with. X-Men Apocalypse is a very boring fucking movie. The movie spends an hour kind of sloppily introducing its characters, showing that Mystique has kind of been going back and forth saving random mutants who have been shoved into cages in like fight clubs and such, with her most importantly saving who is apparently her son in this continuity, probably being Nightcrawler, who of course is being forced to fight against Angel. Angel, who now in this timeline has been born a lot earlier and in Britain. Sure, I guess. She then, with help of Caliban, whom is a guy who can kind of just sense where other mutants is, she can just tell where they are. I'm not entirely sure what she was trying to do in the first place. I believe Caliban just tries to make sure that the mutants... I don't know why she was there, but through him does she find out that, hey, Magneto's been doing some stuff. Magneto has been living with his wife and daughter, living in this quaint little town in Poland, being a metal worker, ha ha ha. And, you know, he's been actually respected by the community until recently when he tried to save his boss who was nearly crushed by a fucking big old thing. Some people told the police, and the police came for him, and as he was about to give up, his daughter kind of goes crazy, sending some animals after him, because I guess that's the power that she got. Some guy kind of accidentally shot her and Magneto's wife with a bow and arrow, and that's unfortunate, mainly because that is a sad moment, but also because we didn't get enough time with the two of the characters. I would have loved to have been like, fuck, no, but we don't really get any. I mean, I'm sad for Magneto, because it's cool to see this character that we've grown the last two movies to generally try and live a good life and have that ripped from him. It sucks. But I didn't learn about these characters, so I don't care as much as I would if I had really grown to like them, you know, this. And also through this beginning part, Havoc from the previous two shows up again, brings his brother, of course, is Cyclops, a thing that, you know, comic fans like me knew beforehand, but if you didn't know, you'd be like, what? This whole time they were just happened to be brothers? I mean, sure, I guess. It's especially weird because the people who were behind First Class were all like, no, he isn't related to him. Which I wish they didn't say that in the first place, because I would have been fine with them related, but the fact that you said that they weren't, now they suddenly are, a little bit strange. Also suddenly related is Quicksilver. Quicksilver, who hears about that Magneto went and fucking murdered those cops like immediately after they killed his family. He's like, oh, that's where Magneto is, and he cares because he is now Magneto's son. Which again, makes sense because of the comics, and because of that funny little line in the last movie. But this character arc is entirely pointless in this movie, as is Quicksilver. Quicksilver has 0 point in this whole fucking movie. And honestly, wish he didn't show up, but we'll get to that. Because Magneto happens to be screwing around, Mystique comes to Xavier right as Xavier is meeting up with Moira. Moira. I keep saying Mariah McTaggart. That's not the correct way to say her name. Moira. Moira McTaggart. She is here, still working for the CIA. Also, none of the characters have aged a fucking day because we decided not to give them any makeup at all, but whatever. I have a theory on that. I mean, in terms of the next movie at the very least, but not in terms of no one really aging at all in this one. There's just kind of no real good explanation. But anyway, point is, he talks to her because the reason why Magneto's boss was nearly killed was because of this big tremor that basically a lot of people in the world, including in America and in Britain and in Cairo, Egypt, everyone felt this big tremor, which of course was Apocalypse waking up. That's right, Apocalypse is in this film, don't you forget. We began off with us seeing Apocalypse be his old ass self, shifting his body into another mutant who has the ability to heal really good, which is important for only a single part later in the film. He changes his body into that guy, making that the new Apocalypse. It's not like the other Apocalypse is still living in the old body. He's kind of it all goes into the new one. But yeah, he has a new body. And he's played by Oscar Isaacs, whom is so fucking miscasted in this. He's bad. He's bad in this. Oscar Isaac sucks as Apocalypse. There you go. He's awful. He's awful in this. In fact, a lot of people seem like they don't give a shit. Jennifer Lawrence seems like she doesn't give a shit at all as Mystique. Like, she is so bored throughout this whole beginning section. Michael Fassbender and Evan Peters are still really good as their characters, but it's clear that Sophie Turner and fucking Ty Sheridan just don't fucking care about this role. I feel like Sophie Turner probably isn't an X-Men fan, so she's just here to say lines and get a big fucking paycheck because she was on Game of Thrones, so why not hire her? She's the nearest, most famous redhead, so make her the other most famous redhead character. And Ty Sheridan just sucks. He's a shitty actor. Even in movies that I like, he's bad. That's just the truth there. He's not a great actor. And that's unfortunate, because this is the most character development we get out of Cyclops ever. Mainly him and Jean Grey are kind of hanging out. They're just, I like the single moment they have when he's given his glasses to finally see, and they seemingly have a moment, but that's never expanded upon. Now we have to focus on Apocalypse, who just kind of gets the help of Psylocke, played by Olivia Munn, which regardless of the cool look, she has zero personality in this fucking movie. Like, I can't even tell you if Olivia Munn was good or bad in this film because she's barely fucking in it. She barely says anything. She just stands there, she looks like Psylocke. There you go. Cool. I'm glad we're still objectifying Olivia Munn even throughout all these years of her career. That's apparently all people care about. Neat fucking radio. He also takes Storm, who also barely says anything throughout this film, but he also makes their powers stronger, which doesn't matter for anything for Psylocke because we didn't see anything before he kind of made her power better. But also Storm is weird because she didn't have white hair until he made her powers better, and that's a question I'll raise for later. Because for now, I'm just going to ask the question of why the fuck when he gets Angel, who also isn't really important in this film besides as a lackey, he makes his fucking wings metal, which, yeah, of course, that's what Archangel does, but, that makes sense because of the, crazy technology that he's built throughout the years in the comics, you know? He just kind of has the power to make their powers stronger, evolve them more than they would have already been, so those are naturally existing metal wings that he just latently had in him? What fucking sense does that make? Now there are such things as metal organic compounds, but it's not like people or any kind of animal just naturally grows fucking metal from itself. Or, that's fucking weird that Wolverine felt right as I said that, the man who has natural metal coming from himself. But that's also the case, is that unless it's physically fucking forced inside you because you have a fucking skeleton that will allow for that kind of thing, that doesn't make any fucking sense. It needs to be through some kind of technology, like Wolverine, who we'll talk about in a fucking second. But until then, he gets the sad fucking Magneto, who's about to kill all of his employees, but don't worry, because Apocalypse just does that for him, in the goofiest way possible, by just shoving them in the ground. because I guess he can just do that. Why doesn't he just do that in a later part of the fucking movie? Whatever. Right as all the characters are seemingly even beginning to have any kind of character development, you realize it's nearly been a fucking hour in the movie, and all these characters are only now just beginning to get their character development. It's too bad now we're in the third act of the film. Whoop. Well, at least second act of the film, which is really just the in-between, before the final battle, I guess. What's that in-between? Well, 3 stupid garbage scenes. Xavier tries to find Magneto entirely separate from Apocalypse, and they find out Apocalypse is with him, which, yes, Xavier and Moira were talking about Apocalypse because of the tremor, but they basically completely ignored it because Mystique asked him to find Magneto. But now, yep, they're both now related. Isn't that fucking convenient as all shit? First we get 3 shitty scenes, first of which is Apocalypse somehow connecting to Xavier and using his mental powers to just make everyone launch every nuke ever, but instead of just using that to just, you know, fucking kill everyone, he decides to just keep them up in space. And then he just comes to the X-Mansion because he just knows where they are, and then he just takes Xavier so he can, you know, just, so he can shift his body into Xavier's. But because Havoc tried to shoot at them as they left, Havoc accidentally hit this part of an experimental part for the Blackbird, so that makes the whole mansion explode. And so the other shittier scene is a worse version of the Quicksilver scene. Because what was cool about the original Quicksilver scene was the fact that very clearly he had, you know, cool, super quick powers, and this was from his perspective of him moving at a regular speed to him, and then what we would normally see is the zip zooming. But when he's doing the like grab zip wall things are still slowing around him, it makes him basically impossibly fast, which makes him basically fucking invincible. Why ever be scared of anything ever happening to these characters when Quicksilver can just easily stop everyone ever? Part of me can't hate this scene because it does kind of have its little funny moments, but it's just like, why'd you do this again? And it's just not it's not as cool because it's just him kind of running back and forth taking people, which again he should not be fast enough to. I know Quicksilver's real fast, but the house is mid-explosion. There's no way he should be able to save all of these kids. By the way, probably not as many kids as we saw in other parts of this movie as there is of him saving them, which, sure, whatever. He can't save Havoc, though, for some reason, even though, like, the explosion wasn't big enough to already engulf him in the flames, so whatever. I'm assuming they were going to try and set this up for something else, but they just didn't get around to it for obvious reasons. Like being thought dead but then coming back is a thing that introduced him in the comics, so I'm sure they would have been like, oh, now we can do that storyline. But it's like, no you can't though. Oh, they don't immediately go to Apocalypse because, yeah, in our third shitty scene, they are suddenly met by Stryker, who's the only single person to know that the mutants were even involved in this because the governments, as shown later in the movie, had no idea. So he's just here to just kidnap all the mutants. They easily get out, obviously, because while he kidnaps the, like, major ones, he forgets, you know, the kids, who then break Wolverine out, who just happens to fucking be there, meaning Mystique, as fake Stryker, just brought Wolverine to real Stryker. Why? Why, though? To make sure he got the metal claws? Was she told to do that? What's the point? She would help another mutant. Why would she do that? So after that random side section, for some reason, they go off and fight Apocalypse. In what is the absolute worst case of the fucking awful CGI in this movie, you have Magneto, who's just now able to just do whatever he wants with his fucking powers, just throwing shit everywhere, and it just looks awful. And it's especially here because it just so clearly shows that there is no agency or point to Apocalypse's plan or whole goal here. Just Magneto's throwing stuff around. For what reason is he doing that? He's basically easily convinced to not do anything else by Mystique and Quicksilver, who, by the way, does not tell Magneto that Quicksilver is his son. So what was the point of him being in the fucking movie? Kids barely fight against Psylocke, Angel, and Storm. Storm's easily taken down, as is Angel, who's just kind of brought to a place and clonked over the head. And then Psylocke, it just is hanging around, I guess. Nightcrawler easily gets Xavier out, and he brings everyone, one at a time to the Blackbird, but they, because of Angel and Psylocke, have to crash it real quick, and I'm pretty sure Angel fucking dies in this crash, but Psylocke doesn't. Nightcrawler is able to move like 5 people at once, which knocks him the fuck out, and then Apocalypse shows up and beats up everyone because he's so pissed off. Despite the fact that Magneto tries to turn on him and everyone starts going against him, he just easily blocks them, and while having a mental battle at the same time as Xavier, which turns him bald for some reason, he is easily defeated by Jean Grey going, "Yep, I'm still the Phoenix. That weird, stupid thing is still very much a thing." Which I'm fine with, despite the fact that she's apparently as old as she would be during the flashback, if not even younger, possibly. Which, that doesn't at all add up, but okay, sure, fine. And Apocalypse is just kind of blown the fuck away, with now our new main crew being the cool, actually cool-looking X-Men. Like these costumes, because they're not in the next movie, for whatever fucking reason. Seemingly there's some kind of cool setup for what might come in the future, for what the X-Men might do, and that's a fine enough setup for what could have just been what eventually led into the originals, or I guess a gooder version of them. But of course, there will be a follow-up, and we'll get to that later. But what about this one? Yeah, if you couldn't tell, I fucking hate it. Obviously, McAvoy, Fassbender, Quicksilver, only fucking actors who actually give a shit, because if they don't, which is a bunch of them, they suck, which is the other group of them. Clearly, nobody cared, no one was given any good direction. These characters don't even feel any slightly bit of who they used to be. And even the good actors are given such a shit script which doesn't fit into any part of what made these characters good in the last few movies. In fact, ever, of any part of this franchise. This sure as shit isn't any kind of Xavier or Magneto. They're just doing things to do things. That's what this movie feels like. There's no agency, there's no plot, there's no point to giving a shit about any of these characters. It's so badly paced that by an hour in, it finally starts to do anything, and by that point, I have not grown to care about any of these characters. Again, it's fine to get invested into a character you've already gotten invested into, but when you still have them having no point in the movie, in terms of what are they doing in this movie, it's still hard to get invested into these characters. Like, what is Charles' overall goal in this movie? What was Mystique doing in the beginning of the movie? Why does anyone care about anything during this whole movie? So if nobody cares, why the fuck should I care? Apocalypse is just such a boring fucking villain, and I love Apocalypse from the comics, so just to see him just so terribly misrepresented, it's so clear that the people making this movie just did not fucking care. They made this movie to slop it out, to make, here's the next X-Men, so we can make it as fast as possible. That's what this feels like. It feels like a crapped out movie that they just made to make. The single good thing I can say about this movie is that its costumes were cool. Almost comic accurate. Those are the kind of costumes I would have loved to have seen this whole time. And it sucks that we're getting them now, because we're not going to get them later, and we didn't get them throughout this movie. But even if we did, that's not going to stop the bad acting, the horrible scripts. I say some of the dumbest fucking shit throughout this movie. One of the news people after the thing says they don't know if it's an act of war or an act of peace. Excuse me? Are you trying to fucking wax philosophical in the same fucking movie that has fucking Caliban in it, who's a guy who speaks in the third person like he's fucking some dumb cartoon character? Fuck you. Because it doesn't matter if the characters look like the fucking characters, because if they don't act like him, then they're not the same characters. They're these just bad misrepresentation of these characters, these awful excuses for Professor X and Magneto and Mystique and Wolverine especially, who's just here for a whole scene and has no fucking point throughout the whole rest of the movie. That's more than Quicksilver having a small part in the last one, because at least he had a point. At least he even had a slight arc to him. There was at least a point in having him in the movie to try and show the differences between the timelines. But Wolverine being here almost ruins the ending of the last one. What was the fucking point? Almost, though. Not completely. This sure as shit was definitely a clashing of the minds. There is two whole ideas. The fact that there is multiple stories was clearly from the X2 guys, but the X3 guy just wanted to shit all over that and completely misrepresent these characters just because I guess they needed to, so they could keep to a specific idea. All of this feels so lazy and boring. There's no point. There's no thought to any of this fucking movie. Bryan Singer went full producer in this and just stopped having any artistic vision, any fucking point. And that's especially true because I couldn't tell you anything I liked about the way this movie was shot. There was no interesting ways anything was done. This was the most laziest way to shoot a fucking movie. There was lots of close-in shots that just didn't fit the fucking mood of the scene, some of which focused on the wrong fucking things. What was the point of any of this? And again, a bunch of it was the biggest case of a movie just CGI all over the camera. You know how cool the CGI was in the last one? A lot of the CGI throughout X-Men, even if it's dated slightly due to the times, at least looked really good, or they tried to make it look good. This just feels so fucking bad. Anytime Apocalypse just shoves a dude into something, it's just like, what's the point? That looks goofy. It looks so bad. And I've seen a person get like shoved into a wall before in other Marvel movies, like in Infinity War and Doctor Strange, and that looked 10 times better. So it's not just the idea of like a person like morphing into a wall, it's that they made it look like a guy was playing with fucking silly putty. And the part where Psylocke just like grabs onto Angel so they can attack the Blackbird, that is straight up Catwoman fucking quality of bad CGI rubber people. It looks so fucking bad. And it's not just that this is me noticing things and that a regular viewer wouldn't. This is to the point that a regular viewer would be bored and would so clearly see that they just didn't care and just shoved shit on screen. All of this could have been mitigated by just thinking of what they should or shouldn't have put in there. Take Quicksilver out, take Mystique out, she's not important to this plot line. Just have it as Havoc's gonna teach the next generation, you're focusing on them, and then there's also Apocalypse in the background. And he should have been talking with his other people who's been talking with each other. We should have learned why they are like even working with Apocalypse, and Magneto should have joined an hour in, yes, but we should have learned about the characters by that point. They sure as shit shouldn't have jumped right into the craziness. They should have did some stuff, then took Xavier, then had him mentally fight to stop all the nukes, and they would have needed to get to Apocalypse, who then they would have had a reason for Magneto to do all that, to like keep... The Stryker thing could have easily still happened, obviously without Wolverine, because we don't need him in this movie. That could have happened as the first mission, and maybe be the reason why the kids are put into an X-Men team, and that they could be training, and then they would have needed to go on their first true mission. Look, if you wanted Quicksilver in there, he should have just been part of that group that should have been with them the whole time, instead of suddenly in the middle of it and then just barely doing anything for the rest of it. And the worst part of the story for me is what it's trying to fucking imply, that Storm and Xavier have the hair or hairn't because of Apocalypse. Like, Storm just has naturally white hair. There was no problem in thinking that. Why? What? That's stupid. Why have Apocalypse be the reason why Xavier loses his fucking hair? What is the point? Because that implies that has always been that way because this is a prequel, but we know this isn't a prequel because this is a different fucking timeline, because you established it's a different timeline than previous. So you clearly just didn't care. Apocalypse was shoved in his fucking, like, pyramid millions of years ago, BC. Did he awaken at some point in the original timeline before X1 and that a version of this happened as well? Is that what we're trying to imply? That like post X-Men Origins Wolverine he met that like Cyclops met with the other version of Jean Grey and they were friends, and then they met with the original version of Storm because of the original timeline version of Apocalypse. I would love to know if any of this was in the original timeline, because the things that this implies yes, that's what it would be true. This movie has a shit story, has bad acting, has garbage CGI, which looks so aimless and horrible, has boring, shoddily done camera work. This movie is a boring mess that was just made so clearly fast they just poop it out in theaters. Everyone who was helped making this, regardless of if they were a good actor, director, writer beforehand, should be ashamed they even had a fucking role in making this movie all come together. Lesser so the actors, but them too. Especially Jennifer Lawrence, who again, clearly didn't give a shit. So much to the point that her next appearance will be her just dying off mid-fucking movie with a worse look. But we'll talk about that. Because the next time we'll see this group will be the very last time we see this group, the very last older pre-X1 X-Men but in a new timeline group, which will be in Dark Phoenix, the kind of last X-Men film. But before that, let's take a side thing. We're talking about both of the Deadpool films. One was released before Apocalypse and one was released after Logan, but it's best to just like watch them both right here, because I feel like they add to the themes of what we'll talk about later. Until then, X-Men Apocalypse obviously gets the same fucking rating as X3, because I think about it in the exact same way. I think it's better than X3, but it's just as much of a mess. They had a great setup for a nice future, and they immediately shat this out, and due to that, they took away all goodwill possible that would have went into trying to continue to make this a better franchise. So, great job there, guys. It's not just the MCU being successful, it's very clearly Fox not knowing what they're supposed to be doing with these characters, and then not allowing any person who wants any good ideas to do it, because but it might be risky. That was so very clearly the idea there. Thankfully, though, they almost thought that Deadpool 1 was going to be a failure, so when we get to that movie, we actually have some interesting ideas there. So of course, that'll be next time. Until then, I've been the Movie-a-thoner. If you enjoyed this video, then go ahead and subscribe. I got a whole bunch of them coming up, and you can check all the ones out I have on my channel already. Do you like Apocalypse? Do you have other movies that you like because you have bad taste? Then leave that stuff in the comments. Importantly, stay good, stay safe, don't be an asshole.